In a rousing address to the nation on the occasion of Nigeria's 63rd Independence Day anniversary, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu delivered a powerful speech that emphasized the importance of unity, progress, and economic transformation. Acknowledging the challenges that the country has faced over the years, President Tinubu outlined his vision for Nigeria's progress, emphasizing the importance of economic rejigging and the need for collective efforts in remaking Nigeria. He used the occasion to reinstate his pledge to reshape and modernize the country's economy while securing the lives, liberty, and property of the people. This morning, joining me to talk more about this is Babatunde Olaniyi, Associate Director, PwC Nigeria. Babatunde, it's nice to have you join us on Business Edge.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
Let's get into it. Now, during the inaugural speech of President Bola Tinubu, he promised to reshape and modernize the Nigerian economy. A few weeks ago, we marked his 100 days in office, a period that actually saw the removal of fuel subsidy, the floating of the Naira, crude oil swap with Afreximbank, and of course, the appointment of Wale Edun and Olaniyi as Economic Minister and CBN Governor. So how would you describe his reforms and the efforts that his administration has put in place in the last few weeks to rework the economy?
Thank you very much for the question. Right, and I would say that it's very difficult to govern Nigeria at this time, right? Given the global headwinds that we see affecting the entire world, right, including developing countries, Nigeria being one of them, right? Because if you take a look at the war that is happening between Russia and Ukraine, what is happening with international crude oil prices, all these things are pretty much driving global inflationary trends that are being priced into commodities that are imported into Nigerian markets. Secondly, if you then come to the African environment where you see the political instability driven by the coups that we see among the African countries that have been taken over by the military regime, right? All these things are pretty much making the investment climate, particularly investments targeted towards Africa, very difficult at this time, right? So the president is pretty much taking the helm of affairs at a very difficult time. We know that a lot of countries are just rolling out from the COVID period, right, and pretty much trying to take off, right? And I would say that a lot of the things that the president has done over his first 100 days now to his almost 120 days are pretty much things that were already laid down for him to do before coming into office. A lot of them were said to be real problems and were acknowledged by all presidential aspirants prior to the election. President Tinubu has pretty much been given the mantle by the people, right, and has been not taken the steps right from day one, right? Starting with the subsidy is gone slogan, right? And some people will say that the subsidy wasn't taken out with a careful thought out plan, right? But one will say, given the likes of the fact that the budget for 2023 did not have subsidy from July to December, and we know that subsidy is pretty much riddled with corruption, right? Is better taken out earlier than later, right? And also, we also spoke about the unification of the exchange rates. Those are some things that investors have been clamoring for, right? And we've seen the impact, right, on the investments that have come into Nigeria compared to what have gone into other competitive African countries, which has not been much, right? And definitely you see that in our GDP growth rate as well, which has not been very, very high. GDP per capita, we're currently very low compared to the major African economies, right? But I would say that if you look at all the policies from the subsidy removal to the unification of the exchange rates to the suspension of some draconian tax regimes, right? You remember that the president signed an executive order suspending the effective date of the Finance Act, suspending the increase in the excise duty rates, postponing the effective date of the Customs Excise Act. These are all actions of the executive that has been pretty much taken well by the investment community, right? And the other thing again that pretty much investors and Nigerians are looking to see is for him to hit the ground running, right, with a cabinet that is qualified and capable of hitting the right tones, communicating properly to the people, right, ensuring that adequate targets are set and they hold themselves accountable, right, to ensuring high performance, right, which the president has been known for. The president has done this, pretty much appointed Wale Edo as the finance minister.
Yeah.
Mr. Yemi Cardozo has also taken the helm of the CBN as well, right? And all these things are positive signals that I would say to the Nigerian people and also the investment community.
Oh, Babatunde, let's quickly talk about the fuel subsidy issue. Despite the supposed removal of the subsidy, we've seen this administration covertly pay a certain amount to keep the fuel price at between 568 and 600 naira between August and September. Now, the assertion was that the subsidy was hastily removed, and of course, no concrete plan to absorb price shocks and no palliative to mitigate the impact. So the question is, was that a mistake on the part of the president? Because you've talked about the global shocks and, of course, the domestic shocks, which were pre-existing issues before he came to power. And the expectations of so many people were that it would look at those critical areas and look at the cushioning effects to come into place first before rolling out its economic issues, which had to do with the removal of the fuel subsidy. So would you say that that was a mistake on a part that is now having hard and terrible attendant effects on the Nigerian economy?
So I wouldn't say personally it's a mistake, right? Because definitely it's something that has plagued the Nigerian budget for years, right? I would liken it to the U.S. Removal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan, right? Where there isn't, someone can say there isn't any perfect plan of executing it, right? Each plan has its own flaws, right? We know what people could say that the approach that was taken by the president definitely was not something that was properly thought out by virtue of his execution, right? But I don't think there is a bad time to remove subsidy, right? Subsidy has to go, right? Because it has been something that has negatively plagued our budget, definitely plagued our expenditure, and definitely our revenue, which we know definitely is not very high. So I would say that definitely this was something that government needed to do, right? He has done it, and we pretty much just need to take off from where we are now, ensure that there are adequate palliatives, funds that are allocated to the needy and the vulnerable to ensure that it cushions the effect of the subsidy removal, and definitely government should ensure that the savings, which the president alluded to be around 1.31 trillion naira for the first 2 months, is adequately utilized, right, where possible, where it's supported by cash, right, to ensure that it is used to finance infrastructure development, education, health, power, and other things that will definitely improve productivity and economic growth for the Nigerian people.
And now, Babatunde, of course, we understand the fact that the issue is not with the removal of the fuel subsidy, because all parties agreed to it. But then the issues before it, that is seeing how the landing would be softer economically for the citizens, the ordinary citizens of the country. Then let's just quickly look at the other part of it that had to do with the forex, the value of the naira now. The different measure put in place to stabilize the naira, well, according to economists, was said to have failed. Of course, we understand that the legal tender is now around 1,000 naira to $1. And I remember the president talking about putting up public sector reforms to stabilize the economy, directing fiscal and monetary policies to fight inflation, while also giving his speech, he said he was going to do all he can to ensure that the economy of the country is healthy, stable, and of course is blooming, as the case may be. Of course, it's within a short period of time. But then what would you say went wrong with his administrative policies? You said it had to do with his mien, his knowing, and his experience. That was why he came up with those policies. But we've not really seen concrete positive turnaround in the economy, and that is testing Nigeria's patience. So would you say there were also issues with those economic policies too?
Also on the issue of the exchange rate, I wouldn't say there's an issue, right? Majorly because the issues that we're dealing with right now are not issues of a few months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, right? These have been issues that have been driven by decades, right? And I think that the government should be given a bit more time to ensure that a lot of these positive policies, right, are well executed, right, and the dividends of those policies will come definitely over time. Yes, there will be some painful periods, right, and hopefully through the fiscal measures, government will be able to find palliatives to manage and steer the Nigerian ship through this turbulence period, right? But as it relates to the unification of the exchange rate, that also had to happen, right? There are multiple exchange markets, was pretty much routes for arbitrage, for corruption, right? And definitely it was something that was harming investments, right? And also harming the ease of doing business in Nigeria, right? For importers and ordinary business people, right? So if you find a situation whereby an investor wants to invest, right, but definitely knows that if he brings in his funds through the official exchange market, he wouldn't be getting the true value in Naira terms for his investment. Definitely he will want to hold back, right? On the other hand, you find people, given that Nigeria is a highly import-dependent nation, right, looking for dollars here and there in order to be able to import basic raw materials, basic equipment that are required to drive production in Nigeria to promote economic growth, right? But I believe, right, with the appointment of the new CBN governor, right, who also has an history, right, the current Minister of Finance, right, there definitely will be an alignment between the monetary aspect of the government and also the fiscal aspect of the government to ensure that they work together to ensure that one of the primary objectives of the CBN, which is to stabilize the Naira against other currencies of the world, right, is achieved. And at this point, I would also like to mention that unlike similar to other nations, right, it's always a managed float, right? I know some lawyers have spoken to the legality of what Nigeria did with this unification, right? Given the fact that the CBN Act empowers the CBN to pretty much monitor and manage the exchange rate, right? So to leave the exchange rate to market forces, some lawyers have argued, right, is against the express provision of the CBN Act, right? But I know that definitely this new CBN governor is keeping an eye on it. The recent MPC meeting has been moved, and all these things we know is the CBN pretty much taking a bird's eye view of everything to ensure that whatever policies they put out from here on, right, is the right one, right, it's properly communicated to Nigerians, and we definitely drive the investments that we need in the country.
Yeah, let's now talk about another aspect of what the president said during his speech. He talked about the inauguration of a committee on new tax reform. So what would you advocate in terms of tax changes that should come into Nigeria's tax system to ensure that it is efficient, the administration is improved, it is fair, it is equitable, and of course it has all the right modalities to draw as much investments and revenue for those, of course, who are meant to pay tax, and to see how it can bring about a revenue change in terms of the government's fiscal purse?
Thank you very much for the question, right? If we take a look at the fiscal aspect of Nigeria, right, one would say that in the recent 4 years, I'm proud to this particular administration, the government has seen that there is a need for an adequate tax reform to be done, right? But definitely at that point in time, it was pretty much a surgical approach, right? Where through the Finance Act, certain changes were made to different tax laws, right? What this current president is doing differently is, one, it has acknowledged, right, that revenue is a major problem of the country, right? Has appointed a special advisor on revenue, who is now the FIRS chairman, right? Has also appointed the Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee that is headed by Taiwo Yedili, right? All these are to ensure that the revenue problems in Nigeria are addressed. And one of the major aspects of an objective of the committee is to take a holistic look at the laws, right, to ensure that the laws are written in a way that is equitable, in a way that drives the objectives of government. You know, government use fiscal tools to drive the economy. So to the extent that you want to target certain sectors for investment, you can pretty much target incentives to those sectors, such as the renewable energy sector, such as the agricultural sector, such as the manufacturing sector. So you know that you have a tax law, right, that has been looked at holistically, right, and to ensure that definitely is one that will promote ease of doing business and also investments. Now, one of the critical issues that we've seen on the tax side is the issue of multiple taxes, right? And that's also one of the major objectives of the committee, is to ensure the harmonization of those taxes, right? There is data to support the fact that a lot of the tax revenue generated, right, from taxes is driven majorly from less than 10 taxes, right? So there is no need to have up to 60, 70 taxes, pretty much burdening businesses, particularly businesses that have a large footprint within Nigeria across the 36 states. Okay. It's pretty much just a nightmare, right? But definitely I know it's something that the committee is pretty much looking at with the kingdom.
All right. President Bola Tinubu also talked about boosting employment and urban incomes with the provision of investment funding for enterprises. So what do you think the future holds for micro, small and medium enterprises in the country, and how do you think it will be able to drive investments to grow the sector?
Yeah, so definitely you cannot grow the economy and ignore the small and medium scale enterprises. This is pretty much the backbone, the bloodline of the economy. There are different countries that have utilized this model, right, to eliminate or significantly minimize poverty. China did it, where through the SME sector was able to migrate 400 million people, right, from extreme poverty to the middle class, right? And we know what the SME represents in the Nigerian economy. They contribute a huge sum to the Nigerian GDP. They employ a huge sum of people, right? So definitely there has to be targeted measures to the small and medium scale enterprises. And one of these ways that we're looking at it is in terms of the policies and incentives that are targeted towards education, to ensure that in terms of literacy of our people, right, in terms of innovation, in terms of entrepreneurship, right, people are adequately skilled, right, to be able to start businesses, right, to be able to employ their fellow Nigerians and to contribute positively to the Nigerian economy, right. On the other hand as well is also finance, right. That's why one of the things that the president had done is the infrastructure support fund that is being administered through the 36 states, right. And definitely we know that through that process, we expect that fund to be utilized effectively across different sectors, right. And also from a tax standpoint as well, small businesses that generate revenue of 25 million or less currently do not pay corporate income tax, right? Medium-scale enterprises pay 20%, which is 10% less than the standard tax rate of 30%, right? So all these things, combination with the Business Facilitation Act, where it's the law that is more looking to ensure the ease of doing business in Nigeria. So when we take all these things holistically, looking at the actions of the fiscal side, looking at the actions of the monetary side, looking at the actions of the tax authorities, right, all these things will definitely contribute to the effectiveness of our SMEs, right, and hopefully, definitely, they can leverage on these policies to ensure that they grow, they continue to grow, they're able to employ people and drive positively towards our GDP production.
Well, it's of course, it looks like it's a huge workload on the shoulders of the current administration. But then for the Nigerian citizens, they are actually yearning and waiting to see the benefits begin to trickle in as much as it can. So how long do you think Nigerians should wait before they begin to reap the benefits of these economic policies, as you have outlined, before they begin to see it materialize?
Yeah, so definitely, I don't want to speak for the government, right, because they definitely have more information than I do, right? But I know that the government, this particular government, has a 4-year term, right? And I want to expect, right, that definitely looking at the accountability frameworks that will be embedded within the framework, right, that we expect to see a lot of these benefits come in sooner rather than later. Right. If you look at what the government has done around the compressed natural gas, which is the alternative fuel, right, to petrol and diesel, which government is looking to promote and boost, right? They're giving a timeline of towards the end of this year to the first half of next year, right? If you also look at some of the immediate direct funds transfer that is happening. The president also announced the increase in the salaries of the low-grade employees within the service for a period of 6 months, the expansion of the social register to also include additional 15 million households, right? So there's some direct impact that would have immediate effect, right? But definitely the structural reforms we expect to see, start to see progress, right, within 2 years.
All right. Babatunde Olaniyi, Associate Director, PwC Nigeria. Thank you so much for this robust engagement that we just had with you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as the nation reflects on President Bola Tinubu's inspiring speech, as some would call it, Nigerians hope that these words will translate into tangible actions that will propel the country towards sustainable development, economic prosperity, and a brighter future for all. And that is the El Dorado that so many people, both within and within Nigeria and outside Nigeria, are waiting to see happen for the country. Let's quickly go on a short break. We'll be back with more on Business Edge.